And Omar is leading us today. How everybody doing, right? Yeah. Well, I am here. I am a talking symbol right now because my camera has overheated. And so it might cool down in the middle and I might be back on camera. But I'm very excited about today's show. And our fearless leader is the one with the blackest hair in the land. My favorite model and yours as well, Omar Yanar, who happens to be you were frozen, but but you go right ahead, brother. It is all you.
What do you mean with an introduction like that, man? Why say any more? We should just cut this episode out, leave it on the Vidal Sassoon black hair, and peace out, dude. Like, let's just call it a day, dude. Like, everyone had a good episode. Cool, done. What up, everybody? Hey, man, welcome to the South Star Classroom. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. I am your co-host, Omar Yanad. As always, we got the beard and knowledge, David Castillo, the very radiant Jubilee Ransom today. Look how radiant she looks today. Look at that smile. That's like $1,000 $1,000,000 smile that she got going on right there.
I ain't never heard a $1,000 smile before. I've never heard it. $1,000 smile.
$1,000,000 smile.
Thank you.
And then we got Existential Crisis Cole, who is even more existential in a blurb of Descartes-like wonderment. I mean, you are the model of existential right now, brother. It's good to hear from you. Guys, we got episode 107. We're going to talk about the Blue Beetle. We're going to talk about Latino and Latina images in the media and what we can learn about storytelling that DC is clearly failing at because, man, DC is not doing well in the box office. But before we get into the episode, we got to do killer round of check-ins. As always, as a Texan, ladies first. Jubilee, how was your week? What's going on with you?
I'm tired. I'm tired today.
That is her check-in, just dead ass tired. What is going on? Oh, and look, so tired she had to drop out of the show.
I know, man. She was like, She was so over it. She just was like, I'm done. I'm out.
I'm done. I'm done.
Damn, Jubilee. I mean, he didn't mean no harm by saying you had $1,000 smile.
I think that was my life telling me to take a nap, clearly. But no, I'm all right. I did lots of running around. So far, so good for the week. And after this, I'm going to take a really, really good nap. I went to New York over the weekend, and I recovered one of my favorite mugs, Love Ya and Mean It. And so this is holding my joy, tea, and my favorite cup. So this is going to help me make it through the show.
I want you to notice that David is incredulously wondering why you had to go to New York to recover a mug, as am I.
I went to New York for my god baby, Sweet 16 on Saturday. It was like a quick 24-hour trip. And I stayed with my parents. And I always end up, kids go to college, kids move away, but they always leave stuff at their parents' house. Mm-hmm. And parents are always trying to kick their kids out of the house by giving them said things when they come, except for my parents. So this mug, well, except if they like it, and they like this mug. And I was like, wait a minute, this looks familiar. And I just, packed it away and brought her back home with me. So that's how that happened.
What are they? Well, welcome back, mug. All right. Well, we got Existential Crisis Cole, not in a Descartes-like ether. And, look, maybe that's like nerdy deep cuts about Descartes. Brother, what's going on, man? We got you on camera. How are you?
I know, man. It'll probably go back out soon. I'm good, man. It's just a lot of travel, been busy, still in the midst of the existential crisis. I forgot that I had that as the name. And did not notice it till you said it earlier, right before we went on air, but it's still fitting. It is still very fitting. So, but I'm very happy to talk. I am such a movie nerd that I'm very happy to talk about today's topic, and I've been anticipating and looking forward to it. So, yes.
Oh, there. Right on, man. Good to hear. Glad to see that you're on camera for even a little bit, like the Chicago representation.
Cubs, man. I'm the only person in my family that's a Cubs fan, man. So
everyone else is what? White Sox? Yankees?
White Sox. So for people that don't know how Chicago's pretty segregated. So for those that don't know, the White Sox are out south and the Cubs are up north. But the first hat that I ever got from my grandmother was a Cubs hat, and I've been a fan since I was like 5 years old. So now there's a lot of people that's fans of both, and you know, there's definitely the Cubs definitely have black fans, and the White Sox definitely have white fans. But you will see probably most people in hip hop, you'll see them with like a White Sox hat. Also, black and white colors and black and silver colors are always just wherever you go. So Raiders colors, White Sox colors, you will always see those. Who is it? The what's the LA Kings? You know, it's just a popular sports color. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the Kings got some purple in there. David, the beer knowledge. How's it going, man?
It is going well. It's hot down here. We've hit, like yesterday and today, we've hit the 100-degree mark. So we're kind of at that high point of summer. Yesterday and today. Today's really hot outside. So that's happening. What else is happening? I've been really busy with work. One of my roles, my volunteer roles, is I'm a board chair at an organization in Oakland called Oakland Enrolls, and we manage all the enrollment application and enrollment processes for the charter schools in Oakland, as well as West Contra Costa, up near Richmond, California. And we're launching a new strategic planning process, and so I've gotten to kind of kick off some of that work. So that's pretty exciting. It's something that it's near and dear to my heart. So it's good talking to people on the ground doing the work. And I also I bought a weighted vest, like a 20-pound weighted vest, and just so when I walk my dog, I'll put it on. Unless it's a dog walk, but it's more of a workout now. And I put it on for the first time the other day, and my wife was like, "You cannot go outside like that." You know, I had like the vest on, I've got like my shades on, I've got my hat on backwards, and she's like, "You either look like a criminal or you look like a SWAT or some kind of undercover agent." She's like, "Something's going to happen to you outside." And sure enough, man, I had some car like trailing me up the road, you know, by our house. It was an older couple. I think they were looking at me like, what is this guy doing here? Thinking I was up to something. And so they were trailing me like very slowly. And I turned around, looked at them, and started walking towards them. And then they kind of sped off. But I'm fairly certain they probably called the cops on me. They just didn't show up.
They probably thought you were a cop.
Maybe. Maybe.
Did they think you were like military, paramilitary, SWAT
I tend to think I look more like a paramilitary guy. That's in my mind. That's what I think. But I don't know how people perceive it.
Okay, I can see that.
It looks like a tactical bulletproof vest. That's what it looks like, you know. So anyhow, you know, the things you got to think about when you have brown skin walking around a neighborhood, right? You got to have the checklist.
Right.
That's been happening, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, looking forward to jumping in and learning about this film. I've done some research, but like also addressing the larger themes that we're going to talk about today.
Orale. Cool, man. Well, I'm glad to hear everyone's doing well. I'll be quick. Ironically, Texas was melting, and now I guess that weather's gone to you, because like we broke 90 today. Like we were at 89 today. Like it's amazing. And like I think every Texan is relieved. There was like a meme I saw about it. Like when Texans get under 90 degrees, it's like, man, we did it, fellas. We made it. We made it, everybody. And everyone like celebrates. And like somehow or another, we're under 100-degree weather, and like yet San Diego is over. It's weird.
Yeah, we start shutting down schools out here when it gets over 100.
Yeah, that's exactly right, dude. That's exactly right. I mean, like people probably just like, you know, fall into the ocean and forget that like life happened. Yeah, I would have in San Diego. It's like 72 degrees down there every day. We are talking about the Blue Beetle today. I'm really excited about diving into this discussion. I got to do a little bit of fun media around it. So a local film crew got contracted out by Warner Brothers to do awareness about the Blue Beetle in El Paso. And if you're wondering like, yo, why are you talking about the Blue Beetle? Why does this have to do with anything? A couple things. One, ladies and gentlemen, the Blue Beetle is a movie about a guy named Jaime Reyes, who is from El Paso, Texas in the comics. And we'll discuss why El Paso wasn't necessarily represented as the city. It was a fictional city, Palermo City, you know, I can nerd out a bit in the DC world about why that is, but it is a comic book about a teenager from El Paso who finds through, you know, fun, fantastical ways and coincidence something called a scarab, which is the, as Charles put before the show, the MacGuffin. It is the central kind of piece of this movie where it is inundated in magical or alien terrestrial powers. We don't know yet according to the movie. We do know according to the comic book, but we'll get into that later. That has donned a young Mexican American man amazing superpowers, and thus has made Jaime Reyes, I believe, the first Latino superhero in like comic book history, because the comic book came out back in like the 1960s. So Blue Beetle is kind of like a deep
I thought
cut.
it was the 30s.
It could, dude, you may be right. You know this better than I do, man. So like, if it's the 30s, like I'll take your word for it. So even earlier, right? Where essentially like it's a big deal to have this representation in the comics, and it's a big deal to have this representation in, I think, a major motion picture where not only the protagonist, but the overwhelming majority of the crew is Latino and Latina. The story is based in a very predominantly Latina town. The entire cultural component around the movie, including the music, the art, the language, the food, everything is very Latino centric. And we're going to talk about not just the movie, which is what we're going to get started with. Like, what is this movie not just about, but how did everybody feel about it? But we're going to talk about what does it mean to have Latino and Latina images in the media? What can we derive from it? What educational tools can we use to excite creativity in our schools? Kind of the ideas of like, hey man, like it's not just about being in this movie. It's like, who are the creatives, the special effects folks, the writers, who are all the various people and jobs that exist within the media, television, movie industry that Latino and Latina kids could get involved in. What does it mean to have a Latina protagonist to help them understand that these things exist? And then ultimately, we're going to have some fun and kind of discuss, like, in the realm of storytelling, which is an incredible way of talking and sharing information about ourselves and our past. It's a very useful tool. How has DC just failed miserably in their storytelling? Because the box office, if any indication, is a demonstration that DC ain't doing well. And what tips can we learn from their failures at storytelling to kind of help us as we generate our stories of who we are and why what we're doing is important for us, our audience, and us as a people in our way of creating agency, as Dr. Cole would put it. So let's just start with the movie, man. Like, this movie, easy premise. You've got a Latino hero who finds the
Hold on,
scarab and
Omar,
dons
because
him all
I don't
kinds
want
of
us to get cursed
superpowers.
out. I don't want us to get cursed out by everybody. Spoiler alert. There might be spoilers for the movie. If you have not watched and you don't want it spoiled,
Oh, right.
I'm just letting you know that there's a potential spoiler alert. Go ahead, brother. I'm telling you, you got to do that, man. You'll get banished from the internet, man.
People get pissed off if you don't give the spoiler alerts. You're absolutely right. So yes, we are going to spoil some components of the movie. You have a gentleman named Jaime Reyes who has just graduated from college. He's the first in his family to go to college. He has returned to Palermo City, and his hope is to use his college degree to come back and essentially help the family out. He moves back in with his mom, his sister, his grandma, and his very fun, intelligent, eccentric uncle, who is played none other than by George Lopez. So solid casting there. And the point is, he's struggling existentially, as a lot of Latino kids do when they're the first to go to college, about the responsibilities of being that first. Do I have responsibilities to myself? Do I have responsibilities to maintain the family? What is the heavy burden that many of us have felt being first generation college kids? He is going through that and trying to, in an existential crisis, pun intended, Dr. Existential Crisis.
I also wrote a book for people that's the first males in their family to go to college. Me and
Oh,
Jaime, we in sync, man.
See, that's what's up, man. See, all these things we can learn from the South Star Classroom. You should hire us. So it starts out with that, and really what the comic and the movie do a good job of is detailing the young like journey, right? Carl Jung, the journey of the hero versus self, the hero versus the journey, or not even versus, just what is the hero's journey? And it is one in which the hero is struggling in terms of the identity of his people, but then the added complexity of the identity of college graduate, centrifugal figure in the family, and the crisis that he's having post-college. Now, wondering not only what I'm doing, but he's working along with his sister who doesn't have a college degree, essentially cleaning up homes. Because oftentimes that support system of, hey, you graduated from college, mom and dad know all these people, we can line you up with these kinds of jobs, these kinds of informational interviews. When you're the first in your family to go to college, unfortunately, a lot of those resources don't exist. So you fall back on, like, I'm going home and I guess figuring it out, because you're the first to really figure it out. In his existential crisis, he meets this young lady, and this young lady is the heir to this large corporation, a billion-dollar corporation, and her dad used to run it, but he has mysteriously disappeared. And now she has essentially tried to come back into the fold. But Susan Sarandon, who is the friend of the dad, is running the corporation. And it seems that they got themselves the hands on something called the scarab, and they don't know what it does. But then the scarab attaches itself to Jaime Reyes. Jaime Reyes has these magical powers. The magical powers are essentially the Blue Beetle. And he now becomes a superhero in the face of his existential crisis, and has to work with this beautiful young lady to unlock the mystery, not only of this scarab, but of this corporation and what they're trying to use the scarab for. So that is a general plot line of this wonderful movie. And I want to kind of leave it to you all to kind of tell me, if you saw it, what were your hot takes on it? If you didn't see it, what are your hot takes on this description?
You should probably have me go after they go, because I'm a nerd. So
I love it. I can't wait for you to get into
I
this,
have
man.
questions. That's why before I give judgment, so yes. So
go ahead, ask your question.
Well, the questions are we, when we get a synopsis of the movie, are we judging? One, I was trying to see if the people here had seen like all of the MCU movies and all of the DCEU movies, and if they even know what that meant. And then two, it was, I just wanted to, like, are we judging it off of how good of a movie it was, or the social political commentary that it was trying to do? Like, I just want to know what direction, because like I said, as a fan of that, like, I'm a big fan of these type of movies, and so I probably looked at it a little differently. That's why I was asking. Is that good for you, Drew? That was a okay.
Lovely.
Cool.
I mean, look, man, I want you to do all the things. I want you to talk about this movie in terms of, did you liked it or not? I want you to talk about the box office. I want you to nerd out about the DC thing. But I'd love for you to come back and tie this into the social political commentary, because that has a lot to do with kind of its integration into the education and stuff. So, man, like, it's our show, man. We can do whatever we want. Talk your stuff.
I got you. Well, I'll go after Jube and the beard. Dapper beard, by the way. He's the dapper beard today.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, he really is dapper.
Yeah, I trimmed a little bit. I didn't see the film. First off, I'm generally familiar with the story. Did some of the background research on the original story, and so I'm just like, I'm more or less here to listen. I'll pick up the pieces once we get into the kind of social, political, the representation pieces in film. So I'm the person walking off the street.
We always got to have one on the show, man. Always got to have one. Jube,
Yep.
thoughts? Like, you did your homework.
I did. Yeah, I
This
was eating
woman said she did her
popcorn
homework.
at 10:30 in the morning. It was a little crazy, but I mean, I loved it. I enjoyed it because I'm a big heart, and to me, it was the entire movie was founded on the importance of family. Like, yes, there were a bunch of different challenges and a
Mm-hmm.
few existential crises and all of that, but at the end of the day, the consistent piece that was threaded through was the importance of family, right? The highs, the lows. So that's what I love. And then there were a couple things that I was like, that's a little sermon in there
Mm-hmm.
at the end when it was like a fighting scene at the end, and Blue Beetle was like, "Oh, I can create any weapon that I want." And I think whatever the name of the creature is, I forgot the name of it, was like, whatever you can imagine, you can become something like that. I was like, oh snap, where do I send my offering? Because that's a little bit of a sermon right there. So I think it was also like inspirational in that sense. And I'll jump in later, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah. And the movie was called Blue Beetle, Miss Mama Toya. It was Blue Beetle. So all right, so boom, right? Like, so Blue Beetle's been around since like 1939, and it's like multiple characters. It's like 3 different characters. And the reason why I was asking all those questions is because the box office should not fully be an indication of whether or not DC cares about representation or it doesn't, right? So one of their biggest movies was a movie that people call representation movie, which is Wonder Woman. It was the first one. It was one of the first ones to make as much as it did, the first Wonder Woman. The reason why I asked those questions though is because, and I got a Latino homie too, like this was kind of supposed to be you all's Black Panther or Shang-Chi or Wonder Woman. But what's happening is, for those that don't know, if you're not familiar, DCEU is the DC Extended Universe. So this is like their movies, and they've been struggling. It's been really hit or miss. So James Gunn from Marvel, who did a really dope job with Guardians of the Galaxy and all that stuff, he had got let go from Marvel. When he was let go, DC picked him up, and his movies, actually, he redid Suicide Squad and did a show, and they actually did really well. So what was happening is they're in flux. They're in the middle of like getting rid of the old DCEU. So they got rid of the Superman, the Batman, and the Flash movie did not do well. So they're probably going to get rid of that person. And then James Gunn is starting a new one. But to James Gunn's credit, there were 2 Latino directors. One was from El Paso, and the second is from Puerto Rico. He didn't go in, he didn't change anything. He wanted them to make the movie that they wanted to make, but it's an in-between movie. So it's hard for fans to go see it because they don't know if this is the end of the old round of movies or the intro to the new round of movies. So if you watch DC movies, this is one of the first ones that doesn't. There's one reference to like Batman and Superman, where they call Batman a fascist, and they mention Superman, but like you didn't get any cameos. You didn't see Wonder Woman because they don't know what they're gonna do with the movie. They're trying to see if it does well to kind of keep it in. So again, super nerdy stuff. But I would say as far as the movie goes, I loved all the characters. I love Cobra Kai. I've been watching Cobra Kai since it was on YouTube Red before it went to Netflix. So that's one. I love the grandma. I mean, George Lopez did his thing. They got the girl who was, and it's the auntie was Susan Sarandon was her aunt. Her dad,
right? The aunt. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Her mother was Brazilian. So so they got the mixed Brazilian girl to look like Jordana Brewster from Fast and the Furious. It was in a lot of movies you've seen before. I call this movie Iron Panther because it's like a mashup of Iron Man and Black Panther. If you watch it, it's the same story. Like the Iron Man story was my rich dad with the multi-billion-dollar company. We make weapons. Some shit goes down. I see it. I don't want to make weapons no more. My uncle or my dad's best friend who runs the company wants to keep making weapons. Susan Sarandon wants to keep making weapons. And then it's like this theme of family, but like the Latino family, like 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 the same way with Black Panther, it was about family, but it was like this royal Black family that like had this Black, outlaw, family member that they kind of discarded or whatever. the other thing for the nerds is I know people were saying, well, what is that city? Why is they not use Miami or El Paso? So in DC, they don't traditionally use real cities. Marvel uses real cities, even though they're starting to a little bit. Like there was the Teen Titans have something in San Francisco, but Batman lives in Gotham City. Superman lives in Metropolis. So they live in this like fictional world that kind of looks like a futuristic Miami that's in the middle of gentrifying. So again, that's why I was asking, but I think that they did a really good job. I think they're gonna bring the young man back because I think James Gunn really likes him, and I think there's a lot of potential there, and they might not hold the thing against them. If you don't watch a bunch of comic book movies, I think you're gonna love it. If you've seen every single comic book movie, you're gonna feel like they had something good and then they got lazy and kind of did the big fight type of situation. So I wanted to get that out the way because I know this is a larger conversation about representation. And I am somebody that feels like representation is important. But I don't want representation at the expense of a good story. So like Black Panther is probably the one everybody looks to. And I'm gonna be real with you, like they didn't market this movie the way that they marketed Black Panther. And there was a reason why, is because DC movies been losing a lot of money, man. These are not movies they made. How much did this movie make? This movie cost $125 million to make before you get to marketing. They made $45 million so far domestic, $35 million so far international, which brings us to like $81 million. Like, but these movies don't go for $200 million or 300. These are $1 billion. We need $1 billion return, right? We need you in the 700s. Like, a $650,000 return is seen as like a failure, right? So take that and now look at what they made. So we may or may not see this iteration of it again. But as far as like the representation, I think that I do feel like it has some really good solid moments around like the family stuff. I think the family had a lot to do, which was really cool. You really got to fall in love with that family. Like I like the sister. To be honest with you, I wouldn't have been mad if the sister was the protagonist. Like I think she had the most personality. She had more personality than he did. And so I would hope that if you are Latino, like, I mean, I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to say, right? Because I don't want to go tell you to go see it. Like, you got to go see it because it's a movie with some brown representation. I mean, if you want to get another one, you might want to go see it. But I don't know if it was at the caliber of the first Black Panther. You get what I'm saying? I don't know if it was at the caliber of the first Wonder Woman. That second Wonder Woman was trash, but
so I want to
was hard.
I want to bring this up because I think you bring up a really good point, and it kind of gets us into like, why is it meaningful to have Latino imagery in movies? Why does this matter? So I'm talking to my boy Julio. So Julio and I grew up in El Paso. So just another quick insert. If you've seen the movie, you may have noticed a couple mentions of El Paso. There are all sorts of like funny little Easter eggs to go back to the fact that this was in El Paso. So they flash that they live on El Paso Street when they show the house. When Jaime Reyes is having beers with his sister on top of the roof, they're drinking a beer from a brewery here in El Paso called Old Sheepdog Brewery. That was like a tiny Easter egg. In George Lopez's car, he's got a seat cover and it's got a sunset and it says El Paso. So my boy Julio was saying something really cool. He's like, hey man, have you seen Blue Beetle? Like, go see it. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, why, man? And I just wanted to hear it because I was going to go see it anyways. He's like, well, it was a very stereotypical representation of being Latino, being Mexican American. All the stereotypes were there, right? Like the abuelita who may or may not have fought in the revolution, the whole family contingency kind of living together, which is not atypical of things in El Paso and amongst like Mexican American families. And he's like, while it was really stereotypical, at least we got something. At least there was a representation out there about us and our culture that was in a movie, as opposed to say like, I don't know, like an animated cartoon by Disney that is trying to reflect what life is like for us, because some of those stereotypes, I would arguably say, were true. But I think what I'm getting at, Doc, is how does this impact the representation of Latinos in a different way than Black Panther did? Because just to kind of set this up really quickly, I think what I would say to that is that Black Panther did this incredible representation of Black folks essentially being the kings and queens that they were in African history that has been erased from our historical textbooks. The advanced technology, the kind of leaders of the world, right? In like Wakanda, versus an arguably stereotypical, like, this is what it means to be Mexican American and these existential crises and living at home and the abuelita who's really cool and eccentric. So I would arguably ask you all about that first question and say, like, what is it that it is meaningful to have this imagery in movies? And does it matter what kind of imagery? Meaning, like, does it matter it was as good as Black Panther because it's there? Or does it matter because it's not as impactful as, say, a Black Panther, which, by the way, did exceptionally well in the box offices because it was not only a great story, but I think a very beautifully driven representation of culture in a way that we have not seen in movies before. Well, we have seen them before, but not in major comic book mainstream movies.
So I'll give my 3 minutes, and I'm putting myself on a timer, so I won't super go over y'all and hella nerding out. But I would say that one, it was very similar to Black Panther, and that was the same issue that Black Panther had, right? Like a lot of black people loved it and were happy about it, and some felt that there was a lot of stereotypes. I don't envy these people, right? And Ryan Coogler is from Oakland. Like, we go to the same barber, and if you see in Black Panther, they got a bunch of Oakland Easter eggs too, right? Like, like Killmonger's from Oakland, and like, and all that stuff, right? And so what I would say is, it's difficult when you have the weight of a race to kind of hang on your shoulders. I mean, Shang-Chi went through the same thing, right? Where it's like, okay, we got to show the American immigrant story. Then we got to go back to the ancient, thing and do this. And I think that in this movie, I think they were trying. I think that I just think it's a hard task. You're not gonna make everybody happy. I will say, as somebody who's not Latino, I think that they did a good job of making a relatable story that did not feel like I couldn't watch it because I wasn't Latino, right? And I think that's just what the dude might have been going for. I think the other thing too, man, is that Coogler, who really did struggle, like, I mean, he did a really good job, but then, Chadwick Boseman dies. They can't recast him. They got to do this thing. And, I don't know if everybody here has watched Black Panther 2, but like, they had to deal with all that. And they introduced the Latino component there, where he worked really, really close with like Latino folks and directors, and like trying to get like ancient Aztec history and things, to build it with the mythology. And so, I mean, that dude went to Africa to like do research. He went to these other places to do it. So, I mean, look, man, the representation thing is a and but type of situation. You want to see stuff represented, like, but you got to understand, man, whether it's Disney, whether it's DC, whether it's, whatever, like, there's a bottom line at the end of the day. And, it can be kind of difficult when you ask for that, though. And then you can't be mad when you start getting it. So, like, again, I'm going to end my point on this. I still got 50 seconds left, right? Black people, for like 5, 6, like 10 years, I've been hearing Juneteenth. Like, Juneteenth has been a thing that we kind of just been celebrating and educating people on our own. But people are like, yo, we need that nationally recognized. We need this and we need that. And it's like, all right, cool. So now it's a holiday. And then you get mad when Walmart got, the Juneteenth, cake and the Juneteenth ice cream and the Juneteenth. Like, when you ask for that and you let that part of your culture become mainstream, you're gonna feel some kind of way when it starts to really become mainstream. You know what I'm saying? And I think there was a lot of different talk. There's a lot of different things underneath the surface that, whether it's the brothers that just did this movie, Ryan Coogler, was it Patty Jenkins that did that did
Wonder Woman,
and even Captain Marvel, like where Wonder Woman got it right with the girl with the female representation, like girl power. You know, Captain Marvel kind of OD'd on it, right? And a lot of people were offended because it's like, come on, man, you ain't got to hamstring me like this. And it kind of happened at the expense of a good story. So my thing is, I don't need a black Superman. I don't need a black Batman. Give me good black characters with really good stories. And if you tell a good story, I think it can really galvanize a lot of people. But I don't envy any of these people because somebody is going to be mad and somebody's going to call you a sellout. I went 40 seconds over. My bad.
Hey, man, it's a good question. So in addition, David, Jubilee, kind of why is it meaningful to have this representation? I think Charles brings up a really critical point, right? Which is, are we injecting these cultural precepts just to inject them for money to gather a black or a Latino audience? Or are we actually giving them the credence that they need by developing good stories? It's a slippery slope. So, you know, why is it meaningful? And what do you think about that slippery slope? That's a damn good question, man. Damn, Charles, you got deep. You got deep today.
I think with talking about like Latina images in film, the challenge that we face is that there just aren't enough of them. So when they do come along, we tend to like hyper kind of overanalyze them or hyper criticize them either way, right? Like it was true to the mark in terms of the you know, the story that was told, you know, culturally accurate, or it was far off, you know, whatever that is. So I think, you know, you said it earlier, Charles said it. I think it's important to have, you know, like to be represented, right? There's a whole story about like, I felt like I heard more about, you know, the previous character from Wakanda Forever, Tenoch, right? I heard more hype about him in that film than I've heard about Blue Beetle, right? So there's definitely this component of like marketing and your marketing budget and how and when these things come out, you know. So there's that. But I think, yeah, it's a slippery slope between saying just because we don't have, you know, a large, you know, we're not largely represented in, we're talking about film here. Does that mean that we should just take anything, right? And so I think it's
and
more
I want
of
to let me ask you about that really quickly, just in like, because dude, as Latinos, what do we have, dude? You ask any Latino over the age of 40, dude, and you will get two responses for the most part, dude. Like, tres puntos forever, homie. A lot of blood in, blood out talk, and then everyone will be like, Richie! And you're wondering, like, oh, La Bamba, why are we quoting these movies so much? Because that's all we had. But then it becomes a situation of like, are we only gangsters? So like, I asked Jubilee just to stir the pot a little bit. I asked Doc to stir the pot a little bit. Is it like, well, shit, at least we got that. And even though we're represented as like, I don't know, cholos, drug dealers, and thugs, how did that translate into, I don't know, things like New Jack City, where ultimately, like, I love New Jack City. It's an amazing movie, but like, that is a portrayal of basically everyone is black and they're either crackheads or drug dealers. And like, that is the representation of that movie. And I guess that gets into the stickiness of like, are we happy with what we got? Or are we paying particular attention to how media paints us?
I mean, I'm not happy with how media portrays Latinos and Latinas 100%. I think it's criminal. However, Hollywood does not have an ethical responsibility to do that, right? Hollywood is an industry, right? And they care about numbers, they care about power, and they are the ultimate gatekeepers around, you know, what gets out, what doesn't, how it's portrayed, how we are portrayed. And we know at the table, you know, the large industry tables where these decisions are made, there are very few African-American, Latino, and Latinas, right? And so I think that's the bigger issue. So I, in all honesty, like I have zero expectations. I don't think Hollywood's going to wake up one day and realize that, you know, they need to like think differently about how brown people are depicted in films. They have no ethical responsibility to do that. You know, I mean, that's my quick take on it. I'd love to hear what
Yeah,
what
Jubilee,
Jubilee
you've been
has to
quiet.
say.
Jubilee's been very quiet.
Hi. I was just jotting a couple notes. So I don't know if I got an answer for any of the questions, but what I have been most thinking about is the different forms of representation. Right. So I've got the representation of culture, the representation of the story, the challenges and the triumph, the representation of impossibilities becoming possible, and the representation of skill sets. And that's what causes me to give a check to Blue Beetle, because I think all of those things exist, in the movie, and they likely exist in the process of the creation of the movie, which is what I would love to hear more about. So in terms of the culture, like, the uncle, that's my guy. The uncle.
Yeah, George Lopez, man, he did awesome.
I mean, they all, the uncle, the grandma, they all. But I can't speak firsthand, right? Because I'm Black, not Latino, but and I'm familiar with some of it. But I was grateful that, to me, it was a positive depiction of family, right? And like I said in the beginning, that was the through line. And then in terms of the story, the kid coming home from college and having a challenge, coming home and meeting his family that was facing a bunch of challenges, the dad having a health issue, them losing the house, and all of these things, and him feeling the responsibility, right, as being a first generation college graduate, to get them out of it. Now, they didn't ask him to, but that is a real part of the story of Black and Latino children who go away and come back. They leave to get away from poverty, right? To get away from the hood, to get away from gang activity, to get away from whatever, to get an education for a better life. But then they got to come home after that 4-year stint. Right. And a lot of the times the situation is still the same. And because they've been enlightened, because now they have, a more defined and cultivated skill set, they also, and because they have love for their family, they also feel a high level of responsibility for it wherever the family is. So I think that's a real thing. So it wasn't just the fact that, like, he was so happy when he was eating the tacos, like, oh my God, I miss these. And I that resonated with me, because I used to come home to eat candy yams and collard greens and all the stuff that we didn't have at school. So that deeply resonated with me. But it was also, like the socio-political piece that you guys mentioned earlier. So them depicting the story, both the challenges and the triumphs. He graduated, but like, this is where we are still, like, financially, we're in trouble.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And then just the term, I think everybody needs a superhero. Everybody, Black, Latino, Asian, Indian, Pacific Islander, everybody needs their own superhero, because to me that represents impossibilities becoming possible, right? Tapping into what is seemingly impossible, and here it is. It's a possibility. Okay, maybe like, oh, it's not real, it could never happen, but what if? And to me, that's just speaking to the imagination, the power of imagination, and us being able to tap into that as human beings. And then lastly, the skill sets, but the skill sets behind, like, off camera. So a few years back, I had an opportunity, the privilege to be on the Wendy Williams show. They had a segment, it was talking about breast cancer survivorship, breast cancer eye candy or whatever. And when Wendy Williams show was lit, like they had it going on. I think she won a few like Emmys or daytime Emmys or something like that for it. And being there, like, showed me why she was on top of the game. But when they escorted me from the green room into the recording studio, I looked around at those that were behind the cameras, the director, the producer, the executive producer, and there were no other Black people outside of the DJ. The DJ and now the executive producer at that time, who's become one of my friends, who was one of the execs that had been there for years. And that was it. Outside of that, everybody behind the cameras, making things move outside of my friend, were white. Right. So to me, it's like, I'd even want to know more, for the sake of anyone watching, for the sake of education for our children, for whoever's listening, to also be able to identify that there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, right, off camera, that causes Blue Beetle to be able to fly like that, right? The people that are writing the scripts, the people that are shooting, the people that are creating the costumes, the people that are doing the soundtrack, the people that are, marketing and advertising to media, like, Blacks are there. I'm sure Latinos are there. Like, where's the representation in that? So that's how I'm kind of thinking about representation as it's connected to Blue Beetle or any other movie that's for the culture or a positive representation of Blacks and Latino people.
Jube, did you see Black Panther 2?
I did.
So I'm going to use that as a juxtaposition, that and Shang-Chi as a juxtaposition of why I got Latino homies that don't like this movie. They hate it, actually. They actually don't want me talking to them about it. And the reason why was like...
Which movie? Okay, this movie that we're talking about?
This one. And they were like, you got a white-looking lead who falls in love with a half-Brazilian, half-white woman. You start off with this story about gentrification and, like, and class issues, but that shit's done in 15 minutes. It's done when the scarab gets on him, and then it turns into a regular superhero movie. And at the end, the white girl just saves your house. Like, yes, that's it. You just saves your shit. Now let's look at Black Panther 2, right? At Black Panther 2, in both of them, Black Panther 1 and 2, the antagonist had made these very strong points, whether it was Killmonger about, look, y'all left us here after slavery. Y'all didn't send no boats and none of that. And y'all got all this weaponry. I'm taking that and I'm going back. And Namor, who was like, look, man, y'all too friendly with these white people. Like, we will kill everything in Wakanda to protect what we got here, right? They put you in these complicated conundrums. Whereas Blue Beetle was such a surface level. There was nothing. You didn't struggle with anything in Blue Beetle. You knew who was good and bad. You knew kind of what it was, right? Like, they did not let you sit long enough in, like, dealing with these larger issues, and then nothing happened to change the larger issues. And I think, but again, my friend that had this to say is a very radical person, right? He was the one that was like, why is it all these, outside of George Lopez, everybody else here is a very light-skinned, like, it was a thing, you know what I'm saying? Or
we love light-skinned Latinos and Latinas, Charles. Come on, man.
Hey, man.
They're nice. They're safe. They're safe.
Hey, but that's the thing, though, right? But that's the thing. But that's what happens when you get representation. What was that other? It was the musical that they redid. What was it? Do y'all remember that? And it was a big old issue.
West Side Story?
It wasn't West Side Story, but I think it might have been West Side Story. It might have been West Side Story.
Because, but they remixed it. Yeah.
But that was the issue, right? The issue was, it was like none of the you didn't have very little dark skin, like, brown people. And that's the issue, right? Like, it's like, if you're going to dive over here, if you want to be mainstream and you want the Black story, the Asian story, like the brown story, then look, man, we a compromise. We are Disney or we are DC. We have to make $700 million. So, like, how do you make this palatable?
Wait,
I'm gonna do a quick. It's not a tangent because I think this is exactly what we're talking about. I want to stay on, like, this.
Oh yeah, Lincoln Heights. Lincoln Heights.
Like,
my bad.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's right. The Heights. Do we have a responsibility to portray, super accurate portrayals or depictions of African American life, of Latino life, and in the U.S., because there's a whole other genre of, like, Mexican film and cinema and theater that's not what we're talking about. This is very different. Mexico has its own thing going on, but, like, in terms of, like, American culture, USA culture, Latino, Mexican American, Latino USA culture, whatever you want to call it. I think we do have an ethical responsibility to support films that are generally, like, accurate. But I also think there's a certain point in time where you kind of burn out on it. You're like, I lived that shit. I don't want to watch 10 more movies on it, right? But so I'll go back and say, like, one of my favorite actors, and we talked about him on the show here, and he happens to be a brown-skinned Latino man, Edward James Olmos, started out with very, like, like, he played Gregorio Cortez in the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez, which was about, like, the life in the early 1900s in Texas, right? We talked about that on the show. He was a Mexican American that the border had crossed over, right? Edward James almost played Jaime Escalante in the film. What's this? Stand and
Deliver.
Stand and deliver, baby.
Stand and deliver, right? So
he's
like the Latino teacher. He's like, I'm gonna connect with you. I'm gonna teach you math. Watch out.
I gotta reach these kids. Oh, you're the finger man.
We don't got time to mess around. They say, He American Me, right? We all know that. I mean, that's some OG, like, takes place within the confines of the California penitentiary system. Real shit.
Colors.
Keep going. Keep going. And then all of a sudden, it's like, we don't have to actually. There's a certain point where Black and brown people can play universally themed superheroes that have nothing to do with Latin America or Africa. So I'm talking now about from 2003 to 2009, reimagining the role of a Latino head of a TV series for Sci-Fi Channel, Battlestar Galactica, where Edward James Olmos is Commander Adama. Mm-hmm. He's leading. He's like the leader, right? Battlestar Galactica. He doesn't talk like a cholo. Well, he kind of does sometimes, but he's like, shit, I think we just got hit, But, like think about taking us out of our stereotypical roles and putting us into those imaginary roles to actually see the possibilities, right? So I wanted to put that out there.
I know we're getting the time, man. But that's the thing, though, right? I don't want to see no more fucking slave movies. I get it and I understand it. And I love Django, but I like Django because of how fantastical it was, right? Like, where it's like, okay. And here's the other thing. I love New Jack City as well. I know every line in New Jack City. I know every line in King of New York, the same way I know Scarface, the same way I know The Godfather. And I know, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, here's the thing, and here's my tie to education. Just like I would tell parents, if you are leaning on Hollywood to be your source of representation and showing your kids who they are, it's a bad mistake. And education is a microcosm of that same issue. If you are going to depend on a United States education system to be the thing that shows you that you are a whole, full person in what is an empire, like we are an empire in the United States, regardless of how you feel about that statement.
And Hollywood is a mechanism in the empire.
It is a microcosm of that. So the onus has to, what is happening at home? Like, what are those conversations at home? What are those things? And I think you have to appreciate this director for this movie, the brother from Black Panther, Shang-Chi, because what they're doing is they plan the game, which they understand, but they'll sneak some shit in there for you. They sneaking some stuff in there for you. Like, all right, like, oh, okay. Only Black people gonna get this one. Only the brown people gonna get this joke. Only the El Paso people gonna get this. Shang-Chi, and in Shang-Chi, I really feel bad for them because they not only had to cover this large culture, they had to cover subsects of like, okay, it's not Chinese, it's Disney, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh shit, that's a big task. And so, that was my tie into education though, man. It's like, let this be a microcosm and a lesson that sometimes you get what you ask for, but it's going to be watered down if you want in the mainstream. And two, you need to be having those conversations with your kids in your community and all of that stuff.
We have a lot to talk about, and I think we're going to have to hit niche notes in a second, but I want to tie this back in really quickly because one of the questions that I had was, what can the failed storytelling of DC tell us about people, storytelling, and impact? And I will say this in reference to, yes, Hollywood does not have a responsibility to share the nuance of our stories, David, but I will say that when they don't, look at what happens. So Blue Beetle, box office wise, was a abysmal failure. So Doc, you were saying basically they made what, like 100 and God, if I have the math right, like 100.
They're at about 81 million, give or take. It might be a little bit more depending on when this number came out, but
Yep.
So
and this
80,
is interesting. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say 81 million. How much did Black Panther make?
Oh, I mean, the second one didn't make as much because it was just.
No, I'm talking about the first one.
The first one was over $1 billion, brother.
That's what I'm saying. So, Hollywood may not have a responsibility to share nuanced storytelling about race and culture. But when they do give us nuance, when they make it complicated, when they really dive into the cultural precepts that I think Ryan Coogler succeeded at magnificently, you have a movie that now makes $1 billion because we are interested in seeing that nuance. When you play up to only the stereotypes and you give us a lackluster, very stereotypical, this is what you get and you may not like it kind of story, dismissing, I think, the incredible nuance that I would say, Doc, your Latino friends hit on the nose about, where we could have gotten deep into the existential crisis of being a Mexican American in this country, the difficulty of being between two different cultures and not being accepted in either, the incredible pressure and responsibility for a lot of us in this generation and even Gen X, Gen Y, and Millennial being Latino and trying to get us out of generations of cyclical poverty. Could have done all that and then just left it on the table for a basic bitch kind of comic book story that ended without any real surprise. That was just like, here are your crumbs and thank you so much. That is the consequence that I think I have in saying, in modern media, if you fail to tell a story of deep entrenched nuance that has all of the deep cultural complexities that we struggle with, you get $81 million versus $1 billion. That's what I think happens. And that is like, that's a great responsibility to Hollywood to be like, see, like, we don't give a shit about your fucking crumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know how Jubilee feels about that shit, but that was one of my major questions. That is failed storytelling. And if we continue to tell stories that are only surface level, we're not going to drive the conversation forward, and we're not going to heal not only ourselves, but the imagery that we have in this country about our culture into a positive move forward. We're just going to continue to be seen as jardineros, like obradores, and I don't know, like taco eaters. Like, that's how we're portrayed, dude. Like taco eaters, dude. Oh, this taco, I missed it so much. Being like, bro, you know what I missed? Like being around other Mexicans when I was off everywhere else, and I was the token Mexican everywhere, bro. So we're at 57 minutes. Shit, I think we got to hit some leech notes.
Yeah, I feel like let get these folks in here, man. I could keep talking about this for so long. Like, this is so easy.
I'd love
for me
to talk about it, man. It's
but
good
let
shit
me
to talk about.
Go ahead and get Jube and David in there, man, because I know I took up a lot of airtime. But I put the numbers in the backstage for you, Omar.
What do those numbers represent for, like, overall?
You want to know what they were?
No, what do they represent? Are those overall numbers? I think
it represents that these are the numbers that Black Panther 1 and 2 made, right? Black Panther 1 made $1.3 billion, right?
Yep.
Black Panther 2 made $859 million worldwide and was considered a disappointment. Yep. So the game, this is a different game, and DC is competing with Marvel. Like, DC, this was supposed to be DC's that, you know what I mean? And like it is, but to Omar though, I would say, you know, I think that the dude did a serviceable job. I don't think it was a bad movie, but like Wonder Woman 2 is a bad movie. Flash was a bad movie. The way the movies just fell apart. But I just think that it's just, you know, listen, man, you know, and you put in Coco just now, David. Like, Coco did great. I think Coco was it was an incredible story. This is what I'm saying. Listen, let's look at a little film called Rocky that came out probably before I was born in 83. So I think the first one came out before I was born. I'm not Italian. I'm not full-blood Italian. I think my grandfather got some Italian in him, and I was born in an Italian place, but I'm not Italian. But that story was such a good story that it didn't matter if you was Italian, if you was Mexican, if you was Black. People love the story that is Rocky, so much so that there's a whole new franchise, you know, based off the dead guy's son, you know what I mean? That's still doing well. Tell a good story. If you chase popularity, you got to make some concessions, and it's not going to feel good all the time.
And that was the point I was going to make earlier. And that's why I put the Coco information in the chat, because Coco was a fully animated film put out not by DC or not by Marvel, not technically by Hollywood, right? It was Pixar.
No,
Emeryville,
that's Disney,
California.
bro. That's Disney.
Yeah, owned by Disney. Owned by Disney.
Yeah.
But so I think the difference. I don't have enough background on the Blue Beetle and the production, but like it's not just about you can cast it as well as you can, and they did that. You have a director, you have writers, but do you actually have people that have the lived experience on the ground to work with your team that's actually doing the writing for the film? I think Jubilee talked about that earlier. And that's the one thing that they did with Coco. They were moving forward with this movie about Day of the Dead, right? They're like, oh my God, they're gonna mess this thing up so incredibly bad. And I remember at a certain point in time before the movie was done, they enlisted the help of particular individuals and the prominent people in the Latino, Chicano, Mexican American community to come in and work with the team to do like fact checking and do stylistic changes, and just so like people could focus on the story and not get caught up in like, that's not accurate, that's offensive, that's patronizing, right? And when Coco came out, it blew up, not just here, but like worldwide. It made so much money in China and like Japan and other places. And I was like, universal theme, right? It's not just about, it's this universal theme of like life and
So what
death.
you're saying is that you love that Coco?
Oh man, I was bawling like a kid in that movie, man. I was crying.
Now he was giving you a rap reference, but you go ahead and you
that's fine. That's fine.
But you go ahead,
I'm a little slow
that
today.
movie
slow.
Get you. It will make your eyes sweat. It is a great.
No,
movie.
that movie's beautiful.
I had to walk out at a certain point, but anyways, I wanted to put that out there. But I want to hear what Jubilee has to say. She's got some notes.
I was writing my niche notes, so let me know when we're transitioning there.
We're there, I think. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Are we there?
Notes.
Okay.
Jump in.
I think the Hollywood thing in terms of movies could be hit or miss, like everyone's saying, right? It could be a good story or it could be a bomb, but all in all, they're all still conversation starters, and it just got me thinking about why it's so important to have conversations about critical thinking and teach children and students how to critically think and critically evaluate whatever is before them, whether it's a publication, whether it's a movie, so that they can look at it with the lens and go, is that accurate? Or wait a minute, I don't see no dark skinned, people in there, or whatever it is. I think at the very least, it's a conversation starter that can be leveraged to build out conversation, to build out understanding of culture, to engage in, healthy debates. And so that's what I take away from it. And then I just still think that the classroom teacher and school leaders have more power than Hollywood and whatever they depict. I think kids go out, they watch movies, they come back in the classroom, they're all hyped about it. They're having conversations with their friends in school time, during recess or what have you. So I think it's important for us to have our eyes and ears open if we're sharing space with them, because they really are open to what we think. Not that we want to indoctrinate, but at least to put the question out there for them to consider, and have conversation about. And then lastly, it just made me think about, the assimilation / melting pot versus the salad bowl. So my tip to leaders is to really embrace like a salad bowl theory rather than a melting pot, because, I think for so long in many different ways, and I will say this for my brown brothers and sisters, I mean, it definitely exists for Black people in different ways. But like in the movie, there were a couple of times where two of them mispronounced their names, right? And I know that happens to Black people too. And it was like Jaime, and she was saying Jamie, and like
Jamie.
Yeah, and it's like, no,
Sanchez.
that's not my name, And so that goes with I think that goes with like melting pot thinking. Like you're supposed to assimilate. Like you have a Spanish name, like we don't care. We're gonna say it. We're gonna botch it up and say it the English way. Like, oh, you have an African name. Your family's from Nigeria. Your family's from there. Well, we don't say it like that, so, and we can't pronounce all those 16 syllables. So we're gonna call you Bob, right? And so I think as school leaders, as teachers that are sharing space with children, we can encourage them to embrace their culture. We can encourage them to have these conversations just by honoring it, as they come to us. And yeah, those are my niche notes.
That was good as hell. And I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up because that's a conversation that I've had with my mom since I was, I don't know, like 10 years old about assimilation and the complexity, I think, especially of Mexican Americans who in previous generations wanted nothing more than to assimilate. Let me forget about Spanish. Let me forget about my culture. I mean, shit, her friends from the barrio were examples of that, who like went by like Serge instead of Sergio, or like, you know, call me Willie instead of like Benjamin. And they up and changed it and like moved to the suburbs of Dallas and tried to disenfranchise all that. And now the ramifications of that are coming home to roost because their kids are like, I want nothing to do with that. I want to learn Spanish. I want to know my ancestry. And just because you decided to assimilate and give this up doesn't mean that you should pawn off your insecurities on us. So sorry, man. Sorry, not sorry. That strikes a huge chord with me about the salad bowl versus the melting pot, and I'm all about it. So really, really good point, Jubilee. Thanks. Damn, that's a really good point. Dude, today's show, I could keep going, man. It's a good ass show.
Man, man.
This is like strong points today.
Oh man, this is crazy when you get one of them popular topics. You know what I'm saying? It's wild.
It's just like, keep unpacking, man. David, you got your.
Who cares about where the teachers are at? Who cares about where the students are?
Right? You know, this is where you ask. This is right here where you say, okay. you say, look, this movie was people was depending on this. Where are the teachers? So we ain't got to depend on DC for our social education.
Yeah. So this just, I mean, I think I already spoke to the niche notes piece, but very quickly, this conversation reminds me of one of the first classes that I took when I transitioned from high school to community college. I took a class called Chicano Images in Film. It's like, hey, great, it's a film. This is like 1991, 1992, right? There was no literature out about it. And so my professor had created his own like reader, and we would watch films and we would look at them from the perspective of like of Chicano culture, Mexican American culture. We would go back and look at films like The Wild Bunch by Sam Peckinpah, right? Or The Salt of the Earth, which is an American classic about the labor movement, the Red Scare. And then the early childhood, or even like film noir, like Touch of Evil, right, by Orson Welles, border film, right? Also the early childhood films like Zoot Suit, which is a play, and then also Boulevard Nights, right? We watched all this stuff, and we would analyze it for how, not only how it depicted accurately or inaccurately us as a people, but like who held the keys to those movies, right? Who directed, who funded. And so I think I've always thought like that. And so maybe my contributions here for the niche notes are like similar to what we always talk about. It's all media. It's all media. The textbooks that your children bring home from school, a lesson, any kind of instructional materials, film, it's all media. And we have to be in a position to like critically analyze, both as parents, as caregivers, as adults, to help our children analyze and critically think about what they are consuming in so many different ways, social media, all of it. So I see that's the kind of universal takeaway for me here.
Yeah, man. I guess my niche note is if you watched it, I will tag on to everything that both David and Jube said. I think that, let this movie be a conversation opener. Like let it be a conversation starter. How did it make you feel and why? If you're feeling some strong feelings, why? If not, why not? Right? But as far as the movie goes, I do wish they didn't copy just so many other movies. They went to the freaking ancestral plane in this movie the same way they did in Black Panther. Oh, I'm about to go see my dead father. I gotta go the same. It was the exact same cadence. But I think that I think that the kid's gonna be a star. I think that the young man that did it did a good job with what he had. I think that the movie looked cool, like the colors and things like that. I could definitely see this being something that sticks around. Come on, man. For this little Mexican boy revived the Karate Kid, fam. The whitest shit in the he is a star. He is a star, and he carries that series, right? With Ralph Macchio, he carries it. So I think the other thing about this though, man, like I was saying, is just give me a good story, man. And I'll tell you some good stories. There are some good stories with Black folks that I love, But like I also remember reading The Grace of Wrath when I was younger, or like man, it was a few other ones, man. But like, but let's just do The Grace of Wrath. I don't know. I'm not a white dude in a Dust Bowl, like going across the country trying to, whatever, right? But like, but I think that the story at the time was a compelling story. Like if we're talking about art, and I think we're just at a time, man, where everything is super, super, super political, and it's fine. It's fine in some ways, right? But it's like at some point, it's like, yeah, you can be political as long as it's a good story in there. Like, Black Panther 1 resonated not just with a lot of Black people, and it was a hell of a lot of Black people, but you don't get to all that money domestically with just Black people, right? It was a lot of people, and also recognized too, right? Black Panther still got censored in China. They still changed in America, it was Chadwick Boseman's face. In China, it was the fucking Black Panther mask. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the racism and the politics, when you want to play in that game of world domination, and you want to play in mainstream, when you want to play in that type of acceptance, there's just somewhere that they gon' get it. And you got to either be okay with it or you got to not. But my kudos to this director, who I think it's still going to be a positive mark for him. The numbers are not completely his fault. And I want to just say that fans did not know where this movie was landing. Fans just did it. Yeah. It wasn't a good investment to make, especially after Flash just did what it did. Like, they don't know what's going to happen with it. But I think everybody did a decent job, and I don't envy those people. So that's my niche note is you have to be the nucleus, the source of like, what's the stories you tell at home? How you see yourself. So when you see it, I want a Black kid to see Black Panther and be like, oh yeah, but there's a real actual Black Panther, right? Like, that like this shit came after. But if you're an X-Men fan, and I will lead this, my last nerd thing in the niche notes, just for those that don't know, X-Men is based off the civil rights movement, man. Charles Xavier was supposed to be Martin Luther King, that figure, and Magneto was was the Malcolm X figure. And Stan Lee, when he wrote that, when they built that, they knew that they were they had to put that medicine in the ice cream. Like they knew, like they wanted to tell a deeper story. And I love X-Men to this day. I love Wolverine, and it's because I saw a lot of synergy in that character, who is not Black, who's a short Canadian dude with a fucked up attitude. But tell me a good story, and then put that medicine in there, man. I think, but don't try to sell your movie by guilting me into having to see it because it's the Black movie, because it's the brown movie, because it's the Chinese movie. Make it good, and I'm gonna show up.
Hell yeah. I'm gonna jump right on that and give my niche notes and bring it back into education and bring it right back into, I think, something very cultural and important in terms of Latino representation. So look, I talk about him a lot. He's someone that I deeply admire. My professor in grad school, a cat named Marshall Gans, he was in centrifugal force, not only in like my work in grad school, but this is a cat who left Harvard in the 60s to go work in the civil rights movement, because essentially, like, I mean, whether it's urban legend or not, I think he said something in tune is like, look, I can either write history, I can go make it, and I'm going to go make it right now. And dropped out with like a year left of Harvard in the 60s, did the civil rights movement, and then went back to his hometown of Bakersfield and worked with a cat named Cesar Chavez to organize the entirety of the farm workers' labor movement into creating greater worker rights, not just for Latinos, but across the country as a result of what they did in Sacramento. Part of the medicine, that, as Doc said, of that movement was storytelling. The way that they galvanized people to come into the movement, the way that they were able to share what was going on, was a methodical way of storytelling that Marshall Gans has now made into his course, his career. And really simply put, it's the story of self, us, and now. You could look it up. Self, what happened to me that is part of this larger context of why I got involved in the work that I got involved in. Us, how does my story then become translated into a shared experience? What happened to me that happened to so many of us? Kind of like what they started out with the Blue Beetle, with being like, yeah, dude, I was a first generation college kid in many respects. I was the one with these like very interesting expectations of like, oh, you graduated from Stanford. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to change the world? What are you going to do to like bring your family up with you? What are you going to do that's so incredible? And that ludicrous pressure, like I felt that only for it to be disintegrated. The last part that I think the Blue Beetle failed miserably at, that I think Black Panther did exceptionally well on, is the story of now. So if you've got self, what happened to me? Us, how does that relate to us as a context and as a community? Now is, what is the urgency to do about it? What is the action item? And I can tell you the action item in Black Panther was like, we should have a strong deliberative talk about the state of whether it's Wakanda versus Oakland, or the state of putting Black into a monolith, the state of putting Latinos into a monolith as a result of these movies. There was no urgency. There was no call to action in the Blue Beetle. And I think in exceptional storytelling, you've got to have people walking away from a movie asking way more questions than deriving answers, and trying to find an urgency or a call to action about what is it that we're supposed to do now. I wish that was taught in our schools. I have taught that structure to everyone at EPLA that is both teacher and administrator, and it's something I want to integrate into the curriculum. But the reason I bring up the storytelling component is that if you look at what Ryan Coogler did with Black Panther, it was truly, in my opinion, the guy's a masterpiece of a storyteller. I think Ryan Coogler gets it. And Doc is right. He made an incredibly impactful story that then brought in all the medicine, because he's one hell of a storyteller, but he figured out the formula that if I develop a hell of a story that people want to see, people will then get the medicine. Ain't no one going to come get the medicine if your story sucks shit. And if we were able to teach kids the importance of that storytelling, we may have a lot more Ryan Cooglers out there writing movies, directing movies, sharing our message, so that in Hollywood, we have an incredible representation of not just excellent storytelling, but very tangible things that we should be discussing, like the monolithic state of Latino culture, which does not exist. The state of pressures of being a Mexican American, the state of pressures of being a successful Black person. These are incredible stories to tell that can resonate with so many people, that goes back to the classroom of what the hell are we teaching? And are we developing in children not only a great sense of storytelling, but the sense of creativity and imagination to get into the arts and explore these incredibly tangible topics, so that we have something in the media that is not only fun to watch, but something that delivers a great lesson and a great story, because that is how we learn, ladies and gentlemen. We learn in the real world, we learn through storytelling, and boy, oh boy, we should be focused again on some better lessons coming from Hollywood, because, yo, man, these lessons suck some shit. That's what I want to leave us on. Because, like, thanks for denigrating our incredible story of an existential crisis of being a Mexican American into, oh, this alien technology that the Green Lanterns discovered thousands of years ago will save your ass. Like, bitch, I ain't got no alien technology coming to save my ass. The hell am I going to do with this?
The powers that be cut you off, man. But it's all good.
All right.
Well, look, I know we got to close out, man.
So
I got you.
That's my.
Did you want to close, or do you want me to close it? You got it.
Thanks, bro. No, I want you all to close this out.
Oh no, it's all good. Hey, man, listen, everybody, round of applause for Omar and his topic. That was fun. We absolutely went 20 minutes over, which is a good sign. That's David. That's Omar. That is Juve. I am Charles, and we will see you all next week. Same bat time, same bat station. All pun and for DC intended. Y'all have a good one. Peace out.